Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Glenn, good morning.
Morning, Mikey.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I always love grabbing coffee with you, man.
I know, this is fantastic. I'm so excited I called this coffee because, you've shared with me, so much of your journey. And as part of our Sober.Coffee library, we got we're going to have these little snippets in the back that people can take a listen to. And I'm just super excited because I learned so much. I'm so inspired by your story. And so I would love to hear what you got to say this morning.
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
This is all about you.
Yeah. Man, I love that. This is an 18-hour session, right?
Yeah, right.
No, I love having, the opportunity of folks, as they listen, they say, well, who's Mikey? Who's Glenn, right? And so this gives them a little backstory.
Beautiful. So where did it all start, my friend?
All right. So, my experience with drinking, as I look back, in my childhood, as I hear many other stories, they were challenged childhood, started drinking when they were 13, 14. That was not me. I grew up in a really cool house, cool family. I had strict, Christian parents, religious background. It just, if I look at my drinking, I probably drank a six-pack in high school. I worked a lot, pretty much worked full-time. I worked at a cool restaurant, in Philly. And, there was a lot of drinking around me. And, that's probably where I had a couple beers and just kind of tried it out. And I knew, hey, if I go home smelling like beer or drunk, I'm really in trouble because my parents were strict. So I didn't.
Kind of sounds like Greg Brady to me.
It totally was. And then I went to college. I went to Liberty University, and they frown on drinking there. A Christian school, and drinking was against the rules. So again, I probably drank, a six-pack in college, and that's probably unheard of, right? How can I be sitting here
for
today?
The whole college career?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm probably rounding up.
Okay.
I probably had 4 beers.
Okay.
Then I got out of college and, I started on my business career and, I started focusing on my success and kind of what was next. And, I loved accolades. I loved the pat on the back. I love the awards. I love the paychecks. I love buying stuff. And I just really got caught up in that. And for the next, 10 years, yes, there were times that I drank. Social drinking. I lived at the beach. We'd go hear a dude play the guitar, and I'd have some beers. And there were times that I got drunk. And there were times I actually threw up. But it wasn't disastrous. As I look back and my memory gets better, actually there were efforts to control my drinking at that point. And then in 1995. I got promoted to, so this is 10 years after college, I got promoted to the executive ranks, and we traveled a lot. We worked hard during the day, and we played hard at night. The playing hard was drinking. We used to drink our expense accounts, and, drinking was a party. It was fun. It was fuel. It was great. Then in 97, clearly drinking a lot. During the week, at nights, on the weekends, it was the first time I realized that, hey, this is not right. And I was going to my daughter's dance recital, and those things they got like 100 little snippets or vignettes, right? And of course, my daughter was in number 4 and number 100.
Sure.
So there was a big gap of time in the middle. As I look back, I was out in the parking lot tailgating. During that time. And, of course, I'm convincing my buddies to do it. I'm like, something's wrong.
Wait a minute, that's a thing, dance recital tailgating? That's a thing?
I made it one.
All right, there you go.
And from that point on, I made every part of my life around drinking. If things didn't involve drinking, I didn't go. I went to a dry wedding one time, and I tailgated there. I either took the booze with me, or I was managing having booze around everything that I did. Then it really started getting bad, and I can remember in 2000. I was traveling out in L.A. for business, and I pounded it hard that night. I got to my hotel room at like 2, and I was supposed to be on a 6 a.m. flight, so I slept an hour, and I'm on the plane. I mean, I am hurt. I'm sitting in first class, and I am hurt. And the guy next to me turns, he goes, "Man, you're in bad shape." And I'm like, "Yeah, tough night, tough week, tough month, tough year."
Right.
And he goes, "Hey, why don't you just get a Bloody Mary?" He said, "You'll feel better." I'm like, "Dude, that's nuts." He goes, "No, get a double Bloody Mary. You'll feel like $1 million." And I'm like, "Dude, that's like leaning into a punch, right? There's no way that's going to make me feel better." And yet, you get endless drinks. And so I, drank. And by the time I landed back in Chicago, I did feel like $1 million.
Sure.
And then, from the limo back home, by that time at 1 o'clock, I'm drunk again. Right. And that was disaster for me. And that's the point in time where it started to go from day to day to day. So to make a really long story short, and I don't like drunkalogs, so, I'm not going to go in deep, but, 2003, I was at the Masters, just had a disaster at the Masters. I actually, I was supposed to, hang with Tiger Woods a little bit, how these promos go. And I got drunk and collapsed and passed out. Well, anyhow, a couple days later, I was in my first rehab in 2003, and it was in Laguna Beach, and from that point, for quite a number of years after that, 10 years or so, I mean, it's just disaster. It was a long trip to hell. So I'm just going to recap for sake of time. Through that period of time, I was in 75 plus hospitalizations and detoxes. I had 4 full-blown rehabs, 1 for 4 months. I spent 45 days in a highly functional day hospital program at a prominent hospital in Chicago. I've read almost every book on alcoholism and how to get sober. I've been all the doctors, disastrous meds, all that stuff. And then September of 2014, I went to a week-long business conference in Palm Springs, 7 days. First 3 days, I remember I relapsed on my way out there. I remember it. The last 4 days of the conference, totally blacked out. No memory.
Nothing.
And I can't imagine what that bill was. Anyhow, over the course of the next week, I was 6 hospitals across the country, an 8-day detox. And on a Friday afternoon, I landed on my counselor's floor of what was going to be my 4-month, stint in another rehab sober living program. And so that's kind of, in just a couple minutes, recapping my kind of experience of my drinking career and kind of, where I was and what the depths of level of hell.
Right.
I actually, one night at one of my hospital visits, this neurologist in red scrubs, came in and said, you're probably not going to live through the night. You fell, you have a brain bleed, you're probably not going to live. And that was probably, that was one of my bottoms. That was right before that conference. But yet, I still drank after that.
So you almost died. You almost literally died, and then you ended up on the floor of your counselor's office. I love this story.
Yeah, so this is where we switch gears to the strength part, right? What did I do? What tools? And what I remember is looking back to that time, I couldn't even sit in a chair. I was so hurt. It was a tough detox. And at that point in time was my point of surrender. And what that looks like is I actually looked up at him and I said, dude, I will do whatever you tell me to do. I just cannot take another drink. And Mike, I'd said stuff like that before, and it sounded good. It sounded good to other people. It sounded good to me. But this was the first time in my life I meant it. And that was a key for me. And what that meant is I was surrendering to him, and I was literally going to do everything he told me to do. And then very quickly, I surrendered to the guys in that program, right? There were 8 of us, and I told them, I said, hey, I'll take your direction. Just tell me what to do. Just tell them, I just can't take another drink. And then I eventually surrendered to, AA, to the 12 steps of AA. I surrendered to my sponsor, taking direction from him, and I eventually found my higher power, that showed me what I needed to do and not do, so I wouldn't have to take a drink today. So at 6 o'clock, I'm not at the gas station trying to buy booze, right?
I hear a lot of surrender in there.
Yep. And then, frankly, as I look at the tools, and I still surrender today. I still surrender. In fact, I'm still connected to that counselor. My sponsor, and we'll get into this in further, episodes, but I surrender today to the program, to my higher power, to people that can see me better than I can see myself. I was no longer going to be the pilot of my life, and frankly, today I keep working the 12 steps. I work the 12 steps with other people, and in fact, there's actually 22 things I do today, daily, weekly, monthly, so that I don't take that next drink, so it's a, continually, reminder for me. And some of those 22 things, from a tool standpoint, is daily meditation and prayer with my higher power. I go to 10 meetings a week. I'm very involved with those step meetings. I chair involved. I sponsor other guys. I help other guys on their path to sobriety and learning how to live a better life. Accountability. I can't believe at the age I'm at, that my wife knows where I'm at all times. And at first that bothered me, but I'm like, I don't go anywhere that I'm ashamed of anymore.
Sure.
Right. So, who cares? Right. But I'm very accountable today. And I also plan my life. I'm very careful how I plan my life when I go into situations. Right. And I play the tape forward. I'm like, hey, is this going to be a problem for me? And we'll talk about several examples of that and break that down a little bit. But, and I'm very involved in spiritual things, right? Not religion. I'm kind of, anti-rules.
Sure.
But I like the relationship with my higher power. So I plug into that. I have a men's group that I'm involved with, and we're all working on just trying to be best versions of ourselves and best people for our families and our wives and stuff.
So where did that, so those are some steps, some guardrails, the word you like to use, that have brought you through this path to recovery. And so now I guess we segue to hope a little bit. What is life like today for Glenn?
Well, I think it's cool. There's a song, that our podcast, plays, and I think that sums it all up for me. And, it's 40, and that's taken, right out of the Bible, Psalm 40, and the whole baseline that really hits me is I will sing a new song. And that kind of frames my whole where I'm at today and where I'm at tomorrow and my future is that I'm singing a new song, right? So now I'm sober, right? And I'm working these 12 steps, and right. So now what? So there's these things called the promises, and they're the 9-step promises. And I was going to meetings for like 2 years, and this guy reads them at the end of the meeting, and I turned to the guy next to me. I'm like, man, they're really cool. When do we start reading these? He's like, Glenn, we read them at the end of every meeting you've been to for the last 2 years. But that's just where my head was at, right?
Sure.
I wasn't really plugged in, or I was thinking about 20 other things, so the promises and some of the key ones, are, hey, if you get sober and if you learn to live, a life that you don't need to escape from, because that's really why I drank. I just hated my life. I hated who I became, and it just didn't feel right to me. So I wanted to escape. So I drank to escape. So these promises, they're telling me, hey, if I do this program, these 12 steps, I'll find a new freedom and new happiness. I'm not even sure if I knew what happiness was. Right? I won't regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I hated my past. I was ashamed of my past, right? And I couldn't deal with my past, right? So now you're telling me if I do this, all that's going to be resolved? You got to be kidding me, right? The next one is comprehend serenity and no peace.
Right?
I had no idea what peace was, uselessness, boy, I was good at that. And self-pity will start to disappear. Self-seeking slips away. As I look back at my life, I mean, that was like the underlying theme of my whole life was self-seeking. How can Glenn benefit from this situation? My attitude on life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity. That just seemed like a dream. And we will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. And one of the things the promises says is, if you work the program, that these will always materialize. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And, for me, I always seem like I'm on the slow train. Things don't happen a light switch for me. So I can remember that night I went home and I wrote down all the things, right, that I wanted back, that the promises were promising me, right? I was going to get the big house back, the big paychecks, the slick, fast car, and, my family. I was going to get all that stuff back, and I remember writing it all down. And I, what I realized today is that those promises are coming true for me, but it looks nothing like that list that I originally wrote down. And the only thing I can attribute that to is in the third step, I gave up my will. I stopped being the pilot, right? I started taking direction from other people, and it's amazed the result. And I also realized that for a period of time, for roughly 2 years, I worked the program very hard. I was doing the 22 things, kept doing the 22 things, keep doing the 22 things because I'm not sure which one works.
Right.
But I know the 22 works. But I did them because I was fearful of taking that next drink. I was trying to avoid the pain, no more pain, but then somewhere along the way, that button switched, right? And I stopped working the program to avoid the pain, and I kept working the program because I wanted more of the great stuff that I was starting to get from living a new life, right? From singing a new song. And frankly, Mike, it started with hope. I can remember that counselor that Friday afternoon said, "Hey, do you have hope?" And frankly, that's probably all I had that afternoon. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I do have hope." So then that hope turned into faith. And faith meaning, not some religious faith meaning that if I did what you did and you didn't drink yesterday, then I have a good chance of not drinking today, right?
Right.
So I believed in you, and I believed in my counselor, and I believed in my sponsor and people in the rooms, that if I did that, then I would be okay. And then that faith started turning into facts, and I started to see things in my own life. And the one thing I want to underline is, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. There's a guy in the room that, his life changed overnight, his first night of rehab. Hey, man, that's great. That's sexy. Didn't happen for me. It's not a light switch for me. It is a slow process. But don't forget what the promises really say. They will always materialize.
If we work for them.
Always. If you work for them.
Glenn, thanks so much for sharing this morning. I tell you, I'm so inspired. I know it's not easy going back through the experience that you had, but
the tour through hell.
Yeah. But thank you for sharing that with everybody, because I hope that I find the similarities in my story, and I find hope. So thank you for sharing. We'll see you next week.
You got it, man. I look forward to it.
All right, thanks, boss.
Can't wait to hear your story.
All right, man. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.
Stay safe in the city of Chicago. Beautiful city.